From the Middle East, a Qatari delegation has arrived in Israel today to meet with Israeli intel officials. The group is discussing a possible extension to the current agreement, which presumably would include elongating this ceasefire or pause in the fighting. Fox News senior strategic analyst General Jack Keane with us now on how this might affect things. General, good to see you. Thanks for being here. We're glad that people are discussing a way to end this conflict, but at the same time, would a continuation of the pause, or what some people are calling a ceasefire, interfere with the Israeli mission of destroying Hamas?
Oh, yeah, certainly, as does the current temporary ceasefire. Listen, the strategy that's unfolding here from Hamas, for a couple of things for our viewers to understand, Hamas has never focused on killing the civilian population in Israel to the degree that they have done in this last operation on 7 October. It's always been the IDF. They've never, as a matter of principle, ever taken wholesale hostages. And Iran, I think, has their fingerprints all over this operation because they have been in the hostage business for 43 years, and you know that, David. Yep. So the taking of the hostages, what's the strategy here? Two things. One, they want to preserve their regime. They knew Israel would have to enter Gaza because of their brutal, savage attack. They also knew the sense of violence and the massive campaign they would conduct would be likely larger than anything they've seen. To hedge against that, they took the hostages for two reasons. One, to preserve the regime, so at the end of the day, they'll keep hostages so that the leaders and some of their infrastructure will be able to stay in place. They will declare victory at that point, if that occurs, despite months of months of operations inside of Gaza by the Israeli military. And the second thing is to delay the Israeli operation as much as possible, to give them opportunities to reposition, to rearm, and reorganize. And they are doing just that. The Israelis have a decision to make. Would they like to get most of this in terms of hostage release over now and then be able to get on with the campaign, or do it intermittently over a series of several months? And that'll be their call in terms of its impact on their operation.
But you know what must be killing the Israelis now is the fact that they are seeing that the hostage taking is actually working for Hamas, working for Iran. Of course, it really began before October 7th when we essentially released $6 billion or unfroze $6 billion of Iranian funds for 6 hostages. I think that kind of whetted their appetite for hostage taking. And of course, then you now have hostages being used as bargaining chips and getting them a pause in the actual fighting from Israel. So they see how beneficial it is to them for hostage taking. That's a very dangerous situation for the whole world.
Yeah, they're just in a very tough spot. I mean, they've got to get their hostages back. The history of Israel and getting hostages back, the whole country has been behind that movement. Just when it's a single hostage, it pales by comparison. Their intensity and emotion about a hostage being taken is really quite something. So they knew from the beginning that their objective to get the hostages back was job one. But the clear issue here is time is on the side of Hamas, and they are playing for time. They know full well the longer they're able to drag this out, the larger the widespread condemnation internationally of Israel will increase. The isolation of Israel geopolitically will increase. The pressure will mount on the Israelis as a result of it. And in their minds, weaken the government is what they're hoping for, and possibly a change in that government. They know they're not going to destroy Israel by virtue of this operation here, but they certainly want to make Israel more vulnerable and more weaker going forward.
Now,
the Israelis, I think, go ahead.
I was just going to say, on the other hand, we do see the pulling back of the curtain. All of the stuff that the pro-Hamas propaganda and a lot of their their mouthpieces over here and in the rest of the world that were saying about there not being any tunnels under hospitals, et cetera. We now know that isn't true. And it's not just coming from the Israelis. Our own Trey Yingst spent a lot of time this past week in the tunnels that were right under the Shifa hospital. We know, we have independently confirmed on our own that, in fact, everything they were saying about the tunnels under the hospitals were true. So that has damaged the propaganda effort of Hamas to a certain extent, no?
Yeah, to a certain degree. They found them on the mosque last week and also on the schools. So, yes, they're verifying what has long been expected. And U.S. intelligence services, interestingly, have also released information that the Shifa hospital was indeed a command center underneath it, at least, for Hamas. But what the Israelis need from the United States here, David, they need us to stay firm and stick to our resolve to support them to see the end of this operation in terms of the objectives they're trying to achieve and what they've assigned their military. They know full well if they're not able to really take down the overwhelming majority of Hamas's military infrastructure and its leaders, Hamas will declare victory and they will rearm, reorganize, and reattack again. And the Israelis want no part of it. They have said, this is enough. This is over. We need a new entity to govern it, but we need to destroy the military entity first before that can happen.
General, you said something I want to come back to, which is that Iran is not merely the funder of Hamas and, of course, Hezbollah up in the north, but they are also involved in command and control. They are guiding Hamas in their actions. That's something that the administration still has not come out and confirmed. Is it time for them to do so?
Oh, David, it's time for the administration to rethink their entire strategic framework dealing with Iran. From day one in January when they took power, they removed the Trump sanctions, some of them. They offered a hand to the Iranians to get back into the nuclear deal. They have been placating this regime, and you see the results of it. The aggression by all of the Iranian proxies has increased in the last 2.5 years. That's the reality of what we're facing. They are on the march and the reason, and we've got to come together to confront Iran, and the administration should be helping to lead that effort, not placating and appeasing the Iranians, which has been the policy.
And, it's not, they, of course, have tens of billions of new funds thanks to the Biden administration not really enforcing the sanctions that were enforced to full capacity with a maximum pressure campaign that we saw during the Trump administration. But some of that money must be used for their nuclear program. They have just kicked inspectors out of all of their nuclear facilities that we had left that we were able to investigate. So what is happening with their nuclear program, and is there a danger that those tens of billions of extra dollars they got from oil sales are now going to develop a nuclear program?
Well, the Iranians are flush. I mean, the truth is, flush with money, that is. During the Trump administration, oil production by barrel on a single day was less than 200,000. It's north of 3.5 million today. So yes, they have the money, and I think if they're going to move to a nuclear weapon, given the policies of this administration, this is likely the administration to do it with. And we've got to be firm here, and certainly the Israelis and our intelligence are watching this. Can you imagine what the Middle East would be like if Iran had a nuclear weapon and they were using that as blackmail? It would strengthen their proxies, because no one would want to attack Iran under any circumstances because they have a nuclear weapon. That's why they want it. It guarantees the preservation of the regime. And then what does that mean? Their proxies can be considerably stronger as a result of that. The conventional means that they're going to use will be more significant than it has ever been when it's backed up by a nuclear weapon. The Middle East will fundamentally change geopolitically if something like that happens.
Well, we certainly know that our Arab allies are against any development of a nuclear weapon by Iran. That is Saudi Arabia, the United Emirates, et cetera. Are they trying to pressure the United States to do more, maybe to get back to that maximum pressure campaign against Iran, at least on the economic front, at the very least on enforcing sanctions, which have become so lax that Iran is now flush with money?
Well, certainly the Arabs were frustrated when this administration came in, and they sort of stiffed them. They held back military assistance that was programmed for Saudi Arabia and the UAE. They pushed back to a certain degree when Prime Minister Netanyahu took over. We got involved in internal politics because of all of that. And the Arabs saw the United States, pulling back. And Iran's aggressiveness began to increase dramatically. And I credit the administration and certainly the Mohammed bin Zayed from the UAE, who from the beginning was the initiator of the Abraham Accords, and wanting to get back, even though he's already a part of it, to move Saudi Arabia closer. And Mohammed bin Zayed, MBS in Saudi Arabia is absolutely moving in that direction. David, the good news is we have had senators in the country since October the 7th in Saudi Arabia, and the report out of there is that MBS, the de facto leader of Saudi Arabia, has not given up on normalizing relations with Israel, despite what is being taken. Likely, he's not going to make any public statement to that, but likely it's been reinforced by Hamas's butchery and the fact that they're a terrorist organization that nobody in the Arab world can control, and they're trying to destroy the very state that the Arabs are attempting to have normalized relations with. That is the tension that is in the Arab world in dealing with the Hamas as a part of the Palestinian movement.
Yeah, and I also got to ask about the attacks on U.S. troops that are in the region, particularly in places like Iraq and Syria, where we have these, what many people have described as pinprick counterattacks that have certainly not deterred the Iranian proxies from continuing with those attacks. What should we do with regard to that?
Well, I know the American people look at that and just scratch their head and say, what's happening here? Why do we let these people continue to attack us? What's behind our reluctance is the fact that if we attack the source, like these are proxies trained by the IRGC, if we attack their training center, or we attack some of their bases, as Reagan did in the mid-'80s, or we attack their leadership, as President Trump did in 2020. They believe, the people who are making the policy decision, that could possibly lead to a war with Iran. And that freezes them and paralyzes them from taking that action. History of 43 years in dealing with Iran would suggest that's not the case. That is why they have proxies. That is why they use them. And when we have gone after them for supporting those proxies, in the case of Reagan and in the case of Trump, that has achieved escalation dominance. While they may reattack one time, it shuts them down. And that is the escalation the administration is paralyzed in not taking. That is what they should do. To continue to just hit the proxies will likely not stop them at all. And Iran doesn't care if you take rockets, missiles away from proxies, or even if you kill them. Yeah. They have plenty more, and they'll get back into the fight. And that is really the essence of what has taken place here.
By the way, getting back to what's happening live, on the right side of the screen, you're looking at live shots of Ofer Prison, which is on the West Bank. That's another region of concern for Israel right now, as it appears to be, and again, we're just speculating right now, we're not exactly sure what's happening, but it appears to be that there are certain prison inmates that are being released and into the hands of compatriots of Hamas, perhaps not Hamas specifically, but some of their compatriots. General, I just want to play for you a soundbite from David Friedman, who spoke earlier here. He's former U.S. ambassador to Israel, and he was talking about the pressure from the United States to continue, for Israel to continue with this pause until either all the hostages are released or until some sort of formal ceasefire has been declared. Go ahead and play that from David Friedman, the former ambassador.
If the pressure continues within the Biden administration to handcuff Israel, if that continues and Israel is somehow restrained after this 4 or 5 day ceasefire ends from finishing off Hamas, we're talking about a mistake by America of, Afghanistanian proportions. The idea, if they keep Israel from finishing this job, not only will Israel be on the losing end of this war, but all of us in the free world, including America, will have signaled that we're in big trouble.
That's a pretty sobering statement. Do you agree with it?
Yeah, I do. And I think what Israel's facing, they haven't really faced since 1948 when they were fighting for their independence after they were established as a nation by the UN, and all the Arab countries invaded them, and they didn't have the military that they have today, but their whole sovereignty was clearly at risk. Israel sees this for what it really is, and they have got to stop Hamas here, and they know that. And this is going to take time, and they need their number one ally to support them. I'm convinced that if the United States pulls away from Israel, the implications of that will be exactly as Friedman suggests. It'll have the implications that Afghanistan had. It will strengthen Russia, China. Obviously, North Korea will become more belligerent. And most importantly, it will strengthen Iran's hand. They will have been able to accomplish a major objective. The reason why they're attacking our 13 bases in Iraq and Syria, the primary reason is to drive the United States military out of the region. They want the United States people to question, why are we there? Why are we still there? Why are our soldiers at risk in Iraq and Syria? I thought that was over a while ago. That's what they want.
Yeah.
And that plays right into their strategic hand. They will check the box and say, we finally got it done here. We're driven the United States back from the Middle East. That will be a huge strategic failure for us, strengthen our adversaries around the world for sure. This is a time where you find your spine and you stick with tough issues. This is a tough thing, to stick this out in the face of Hamas continuing to hold civilian casualties in urban centers, which normally does not take place at all. And they do it because they want the casualties, and that is so diabolical and sinister on their part to do that. And they should be condemned worldwide for doing that, as opposed to demonstrating in favor of them. Makes no sense whatsoever, given their horrific behavior.
Well, and particularly now that we have evidence, we can see with our own eyes that they didn't care about the Palestinian deaths in Gaza, because they were planted right underneath the hospitals, right underneath the key civilian areas. That has always been their MO, to use civilians as cover. It looks like they care just as little for Palestinian lives as they do for Israeli lives, but that's all we can. And again, we're still trying to figure out what's happening at this checkpoint, where we assume some of the trading of hostages, some of the Palestinian, not hostages, but some of the inmates from Israeli facilities are being released to Palestinians. General Jack Keane, we thank you for your time and patience. We appreciate it. We want to move on.
Hey, it's Will Keane. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Keane podcast for full episodes right now.